Stan Van Gundy tweeted the other day that I think 8 of the top 9 rebounders in the NBA are European and 4 of the top 5 scorers are European. How important is that to the NBA's branding currently to have the guys like Giannis, Luka, Jokic at the forefront of their branding? And I guess they do that by playing well. But is that like a concerted effort, or is that just something that's welcomed and you kind of adapt and go with the flow when it comes to the business side?
Well, they're the best players. So the best players are going to rise to the top from a marketing standpoint. And, generally, with some exceptions, the sneaker companies are going to want to, the brand partners are going to want to get behind them and promote those top players.
What's good, everybody? Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and Happy New Year to everybody. We hope you enjoyed your holidays. This is the Role Player Podcast, presented to you by the good folks over at Swish Cultures in affiliation with Eurohoops.net. Be sure to follow us on all Swish Cultures social media pages and YouTube page and all the socials affiliated with the Role Player. That is the handle at the Role Player Pod on Instagram and at the Role P _ on Twitter. I am Jordan Taylor, still rocking with my guy, Stanford gentleman, retired 11-year overseas vet and co-founder over at Swish Cultures, the one and only, the esteemed Anthony Goods, man. Ant, how was your holidays? I hope you enjoyed it. I see you got the fresh lineup over there in Spain, man.
Nah, everything's been good, man. I just want to know who gifted you my barber for Christmas. You know what I mean? She was looking trash for about 4 months, man, and now you looking like me over there.
Hey,
you know what I mean? I feel
it?
like I'm looking in the mirror.
You see it? Don't be mad because I'm beautiful, baby. Don't be mad because I'm beautiful. And what happened, though, is for the first time ever, Buddy in London, I should have been getting my cut over here forever because Buddy put the little enhancements on. He did the little air spray to me, and my line was looking like about 2005 up until about a couple hours ago. You know what I'm saying? I had the little Carlos Bouger Beijing look too, so I was rolling.
You got the LeBron game day special, huh?
I got the LeBron game day special, man. I need LeBron bread too, but that's all right, man. It was yeah, but like I told you, I'm always gonna make a comeback, man. And we got a guest on today who's already brought it on home. I'm gonna join him soon, but we'll get to that in a minute. so yeah, we got
LeBron's real hairline here.
We got LeBron's real hairline, man. We got a little change up for you guys today, man. We have a guest who does not have a lot of buckets to his resume. However, he has mastered a role in the game of basketball. As a quick introduction, Mr. Aaron Radin has spent 20 years in the New York community coaching basketball. He's coached the likes of Sebastian Telfair and Born Ready, a.k.a. Lance Stevenson, and that's the guy that blew in LeBron's ear on the memes for the younger crowd. Spent an early part of his career working on licensing and branding in the David Stern and Michael Jordan NBA era from 94 to 97. So we're going to get into that before we moved on to companies like NBC Universal, CBS, Meta, or Facebook for the older crowd, and most recently has landed in London with the designs of becoming somewhat of a David Stern himself with the British Basketball League, a task that I know he's looking forward to, and we're glad to have you on. Aaron, appreciate you joining us.
I appreciate you having me. It's really fun, and hopefully I will be David Stern with less cursing and a little bit taller.
How tall is David Stern?
David Stern is was very short. He's probably about, I would say he's maybe 5'7".
Man, I didn't realize. I thought he was taller than that. Wow, good for him.
No, he's a small guy.
I mean, he always looks small on the draft, but these guys are 7 foot, so everybody look little. You can't really gauge it off the.
Adam Silver's tall. Adam Silver's probably a good 6'5". Yeah, but David was a short guy.
Okay. Well, listen. We're going to start it off right here. I know you have an extensive past working with media companies and obviously in the NBA as mentioned. But I guess we're going to start right here. Did you envision, back in 1994 when you started, did you envision the NBA becoming what it is today from an entertainment standpoint and obviously from a monetary economic standpoint?
I mean, I think anyone would be lying if they thought that it would get to the sort of the dollar figures that are thrown around today. Yeah. But in terms of like the level of fandom, the level of enthusiasm, the level of coverage that the league has around the world? I would say actually yes. Like how that translated into dollar numbers, again, nobody could really project what that is. But even when I joined, there was such a focus on making it appealing internationally. And the NBA has gone through a number of different iterations in terms of figuring out how to get that right sort of product market fit. Some of it was like, we're going to export, call it America or the American game to these different markets. Some of it has been like, we're trying to shape the narrative or craft the story to be more resonant for each respective market. There's been a little bit of both. I think ultimately, the league, I suppose one of the best things it's done, and one of the best things in terms of how it's carried, I suppose, across borders, is being able to expand beyond the promotion of teams to the promotion of players. And that's really, and there's sort of a couple of things that the NBA did that in some ways are unique, in some ways are a function of the circumstances that they had, both in terms of their ability to promote licensed products related to players, but also the ability for the products for the players to promote themselves, and for the respective brand partners that work with them. Of course, Jordan's the biggest one far and away, but it's carried on with LeBron and KD and all the guys that get sneaker deals, because ultimately, like those guys, they're looking to move product, and the more that they can create affinity with those players, the bigger that the game has become. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. Even over here, like NFL is big over here in London. They sell out the arenas, like it's a really big deal. But it's not like people are running around with Trevor Lawrence jerseys.
Right.
It's or even know who Trevor Lawrence is. So it's a big difference to have those 5, 10, 15, 25 players that are known worldwide. And that's one of the best things that I think the NBA really did, probably above and beyond what they were doing when I joined the league nearly 30 years ago.
As far as moving forward with the league, you see this huge wave from a branding standpoint with the international audience. You see, I think, Stan Van Gundy tweeted the other day that I think 8 of the top 9 rebounders in the NBA are European and 4 of the top 5 scorers are European. How important is that to the NBA's branding currently, to have the guys like Giannis, Luka, Jokic at the forefront of their branding? And I guess they do that by playing well, but is that like a concerted effort, or is that just something that's welcomed and you kind of adapt and go with the flow when it comes to the business side?
Well, they're the best players. So the best players are going to rise to the top from a marketing standpoint. And, generally, with some exceptions, the sneaker companies are going to want to, the brand partners are going to want to get behind them and promote those top players. So, does a Giannis resonate more than a Jokic? You could sort of debate. But, I say, one of the most important things, and I used to be a huge baseball fan, probably less so these days. And I think baseball has really struggled, in part because so many of the players today are Latin, not because they are Latin, but because they actually are not communicating in English to the level that the European players are able to, really communicate well. And there's really no barrier from a market standpoint in terms of their ability to communicate. Giannis is great with the press. Doncic is great with the press. Like, these guys are just, and they've been at it since they were young kids. They've been trained really well about how to do it. So, I think it's one of the things, and it honestly, it happened probably before the NBA ever even gets their hands on them. Like the level of training that goes on, whether, you do a year at Duke, or you do at Kentucky, or you do a year in Real Madrid or wherever, the level of training that you have to be ready to answer questions in either both a comprehensive way and a relatively innocuous way, because generally you want to avoid saying things that are controversial if you're a superstar level player.
Yeah, I had a thought, like, especially in regards to like, let's say Major League Baseball and like NFL, I think one of the benefits that basketball has is, the summer international competitions, whether it be the World Cup, Olympic basketball, especially, once they started getting the NBA players involved, playing with Team USA and them going over to, to foreign countries and playing against the, foreign countries. But do you think that, let's just say like the international competitions had more of an impact in regards to, the growth internationally with the NBA, or do you think it had, or what do you think in regards to like, let's say TV distribution, because now, I mean, just about every country I've been in, they'll show a couple NBA games, whether it be replayed in the morning and things like that. And I felt like every year I was overseas, I started seeing more and more and more, you know what I mean? But obviously I don't know how it was prior, but what do you think attributed to that growth internationally the most?
So I would set the TV distribution aside for a second. Let's just talk about the international competition. So if you go back to '92, Dream Team and the lead up to '92, like why did the Dream Team actually happen? Was the fact that the U.S. started losing, right? They were playing college players against pros. They were having really heavy competition and started to lose. I think they lost in '88 in the Olympics, and so they put the Dream Team. The Dream Team wiped everyone, and that continued for to 2004 or 2006. I can't remember. I think it was both that the U.S. lost.
Yep.
I think they lost in four in the Olympics and '06 in World Championships. And I think at first it was celebrity gazing for all the markets around the world. Like, wow, we get to see the best players in the world play and measure ourselves against the best. I think it pretty quickly turned to like, we want to beat these guys. And, part of that is like, yes, you've got to develop better players. And part of that is you've got to play by the rules that we're playing in, which are different. They're, slightly different rules, but there are things where you can like gain edges on the margin. And a lot of those things started to add up over time until, then all of a sudden Argentina, Greece was beating the U.S. And, you could argue that maybe that was somewhat apathy on the part of the U.S. or the way that the team was put together, or guys didn't want to play or whatever. But, the reality is at the end of the day, you're measured by your record, wins and losses. And we were catching some L's, or the U.S. was, until they started, put the team back together and had the best guys show up. But, I think that actually, from a business standpoint, from a viewership standpoint, was beneficial for the game. Right, because now you had all these different countries who were like, okay, we can measure up and we're competing, and it created that level of enthusiasm. It created that motivation to do the player development and compete on an international level with the U.S. and think that you could compete on the international level with the U.S. And I think to your point, Anthony, about like, oh, then I'm starting to see the games like it's just that creates more interest to see that level of competition on air. And so, of course, the league is going to make every effort to have the product in its sort of best form. And when I say best form, it's broadcast quality, watch full games. If you're going back that far, you're not really talking about social media or YouTube. You're principally watching on full length broadcast, whether it's showing live or on tape delay, or you might there were certainly being exported highlight shows, things like top 10 plays of the week and all sort of stuff like that. All of it was meant to drum up interest. And I think that they spent a good time of focus and collaboration with trying to build up the interest in each of these markets, ultimately to capture as much of the market share that they could from a business perspective. That's the NBA's goal. But, I think it's sort of like a rising tide lifts all ships, right? Like if there's more interest in the game, there's more to go around for the domestic league. There's more to go around for the teams that play domestically. And hopefully you're creating a bigger economy for the sport overall so that everybody can eat.
So with the NBA did report last year, $10 billion in revenue. I guess just you're talking about the interest in the game and the rising tide. So just for the audience, break down simplistically what the NBA and broadcast companies, once you have that interest, what do they do to kind of capitalize on that interest in terms of production, advertising, all those things?
You mean in terms of where the revenue is drawn from?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So there are different buckets. There's broadcast rights. So you're going to do a broadcast rights deal, in the case of the NBA in the U.S., it's ESPN and Turner, but they have many international partners who are paying significantly less than the U.S. rights deals are. And the principal reason is it's about eyeballs and selling advertising, but also in the case of ESPN and Turner, they're driving subscription revenue. So if you look at sort of what's going on in the television business, both generally in the U.S. and around the world, is that people are cutting the cord from cable. Mm. If you think about like how do ESPN and what's now Warner Brothers Discovery make money, there's principally two buckets. They drive it from advertising, and they drive it from subscriptions. Now there's sort of two forms of subscription today. Let's set OTT aside for a second, but historically in the cable business, they get paid a monthly fee from the cable operator per subscriber. So in ESPN's case, they're probably doing, I don't know what the latest rates are, maybe $7 a month per subscriber in the U.S. And when the U.S. had a cable universe of 90 to 100 million consumers, you can do the math on what that is from a revenue standpoint. And, because cable has been shrinking somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere from 3 to 7% per year for the last 5-10 years, and continue, accelerating that decline. So those numbers are shrinking. They've got to make it up in ad sales. The number of people who are watching actually has decreased, notwithstanding what some of the numbers that get reported are in terms of like what they say the viewership looks like. So those are the biggest buckets, that would drive revenue. The other biggest buckets are going to be things like that come out of NBA properties, which is principally licensing. That's everything from jersey sales to, in the old days, it would have been DVDs. Now you're licensing video in various formats, trading cards, apparel, anything with an NBA or NBA team logo on it. A typical royalty rate is looking somewhere in a range of 10 to 20% that they're making off of every single officially licensed product. Of course, there's bootleg that floats around, but they try and catch most of that. Those are the principal revenue sources that you'd see in a league at a national level. The teams have their own revenue sources at a local level, which would be like gate, local sponsorships. They have their own local TV deals, which are sort of like, re-rack what I just said about ESPN and Turner, and think about like, okay, what does that look like for, I think they're called NBC Sports Networks, which is like the ones owned by Comcast. You have Fox Sports, you have Bally's. Like those are all examples of what you're doing on a local TV network basis. And sometimes, the teams might own those networks, and sometimes the teams, own the stadiums like the Warriors do. So when you own the stadiums, you're getting concessions, and there's all sorts of ancillary revenue streams that can be bought up as a function of developing those franchises. And in many ways, if you look at sports overall, and it's not just the NBA, like, a sports franchise can be a Trojan horse to a real estate play.
Yeah.
Like where you can actually, get access to public funds to develop an arena. So you can almost build an arena for free and then reap all the benefits of having an arena.
Keep going.
No, I mean, there's multiple examples of that. Like, even in Brooklyn, that's how the Nets came to be in Brooklyn. It was basic, when Bruce Radin owned the team, it was a Trojan horse to actually get access to the real estate where Barclays was developed and all of the residential real estate that was built around it. As soon as that facility was done, he sold the team because he just wanted access to the real estate.
So are any of these revenue streams, let's back it up real quick. We're talking about the cable. People are moving away from cable into streaming, YouTube TV, Amazon. You see the NFL went to Amazon Prime and stuff like that. So with people moving away from the cable bundles or the cable core or the original cable, does that threaten, one, the local broadcasts of NBA teams, and how does that become problematic, if at all?
Yes to all of it. So, not to get too far in the weeds here, but if you actually look at what's going on with Bally Sports today, like Bally Sports is not getting covered by news services. Like they can't get on air in some of their own local markets. And, you guys would be familiar with this. Like this happens all the time where like you'll get a dispute between a cable operator and a network where they're going to say like, next week, such and such network is going to go off the air. And that's always a dispute about what the per subscriber fee is. But because the bundle is there's more pressure on why am I going to spend $100 or $150, $200 a month on my cable bill, and generally a limited number of people are watching the regional sports network, that are signed up for that bundle, and because it's such a big price, usually as part of the subscriber bundle to the cable operator. So if I'm making it up so that if like the Yes channel in New York, and I don't know what the rate is, but let's say hypothetically it was $5 per subscriber, and only 20% of the subscribers actually watch it. That means 80% of them are paying $5 a month and never doing that. So from a cable operator standpoint, they're like, okay, what's the trade-off for me? Or can I sell it a la carte? If you start trying to sell it a la carte, then you get less viewership, and it sort of has cascading challenges related to the local broadcast. There's all sorts of historical reasons why the broadcast model has evolved the way it did in the United States, especially with local. We could probably do a 3-hour podcast on that. I'll spare your listeners that part. But, I think this is a really important piece going forward because, it really creates, this is where, the national network revenue, the national licensing revenue is all divided equally amongst the clubs. The pieces that the clubs keep individually are gate, if they happen to own their own facilities, so food and beverage, whatever, and local TV. So Lakers have a monster local TV deal, relative to a market like, I don't know what Sacramento's deal looks
Minnesota,
like. It could be Minnesota. Like I don't know if, in particular, but like, that creates a big discrepancy in terms of what you can do from a revenue standpoint. And you look at like, why are the Warriors able to spend the way they are? It's because they own their stadium.
Yep.
For example, that's a local discrepancy that another market can't replicate. Like Oklahoma City is not going to get to that level of revenue to be able to ever compete, assuming that the owners are willing to pay the luxury tax, which is also another podcast episode. But
so that being said, what do you think? I mean, I want to be careful on how to phrase this question. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But how does the NBA then keep teams like Oklahoma City, Minnesota competitive if they can't compete on an economic level?
Because they have a salary cap.
Well,
but the salary cap, it's like a soft salary cap,
right?
And so they do as much as they possibly can, and I think actually fairly as in any league. Although the NFL doesn't really have local television, it's different, slightly different. To evenly distribute the revenues. And again, the biggest revenue pieces are coming out of the national television deals. So that's going to be the biggest chunk.
Right. But also, even with the salary cap, it seems that obviously we've seen over the years that players, or I guess owners from these markets, are willing to go over the luxury tax to get certain free agents.
Some.
And it seems like the
yes,
Warriors, the Lakers, the Clippers now, I guess.
Clippers now.
Yeah, it seems
the Lakers
like
actually know.
The Lakers not this year, right? But they were 2 years ago, I think. Correct?
But historically, they haven't spent at the level of like what the Warriors have done in the last 7-8 years.
Okay. Well, with this international wave going on, as we talked about prior, I know we've talked about off camera a little bit about like residents when it comes to marketing and branding and all that. Do you see this internet? Although Luka, these guys are some of the best players, whatever. Do you see that as the international wave as a problem with resonance with the American fan, or not really?
I don't think so. I honestly don't. I mean, you could have made that argument about, minorities in the sport going back.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I think again, it's like, um, and I would say the same thing for what we're attempting to do in the British Basketball League.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to tell stories. The league's goal is to tell stories about these players so that the fans can begin to have an emotive connection with them. They either want to root for them or they want to root against them,
Mm-hmm.
but they care one way or the other. And I think, in the case of these guys, people do care. Like, they have, really big fandom, and there's no reason because of their lineage why you're not able to accomplish those same sorts of things in terms of storytelling in order to sort of, set whether they're a protagonist or antagonist in a particular battle. I think the NBA has changed pretty significantly. Like most, if you go back, people would root for teams. And I'm not suggesting that people still don't root for teams, but now people root as much, to some degree, as much for players, and they'll follow a player. Like if you're a LeBron fan and you were rooting for Cleveland, and now all of a sudden you're rooting for the Lakers, or
Facts.
Multiple examples like that, right?
Facts.
And so that's a bit of difference, but it actually goes to reinforcing what I'm saying about this storytelling, which is you begin to develop an affinity for these players, not only for their game. Yes, of course, like they've got, like, to be a big time superstar player, like that's table stakes. And then it's like, okay, then what is the story that you're subscribing to that really helps you to become a huge fan of that particular player?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And so moving around the world to the British League, what is, because you see, I think, and we've talked before about kind of some of the Asian leagues. I remember back in the day, I think Stephen A. got into some hot water about, saying that Shohei Ohtani wasn't a good face of the league for the MLB because he didn't speak English very well. So I guess moving forward in the BBL, in the British Basketball League, what is phase one for that storytelling? Is it getting the best British basketball player and slapping him on the front of the London Lions or whatever, the Leicester Riders, or what's phase one as far as that branding goes?
So I think it's a couple things. I think you guys have sort of highlighted on one of the things, which is, irrespective of where the player comes from, you want to create a fan affinity for them. Like if you're a good player, it doesn't matter if you're from Mars, like people will be attracted to your game. And then it's like, okay, what can you do to help the audience know that player better? And that's really sort of a content production challenge, if you will, to be able to tell those stories and to be able to tell them in all sorts of different formats, whether it's longer form for television, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on TikTok, and I'm going to be able to tell a story in 17 seconds. Like those are all things that you're attempting to do to begin to create those affinities. That's one. Two is, and I think you highlighted this, Jordan, like those stories, let's say, perhaps have a better chance of succeeding if they have a local resonance to them as well. And if somebody is able to identify because they're from that community, or they come from that community, or they come from that country. And so I won't say you naturally do, but people gravitate towards rooting towards where they're from, particularly if in an international setting.
Yeah.
So I think, we absolutely want to I would love, for example, with you playing in the BBL now, I would love for people to understand your story, how you got here, how you became the person that you are, much less the player that you are, and either, root hard for you or root hard against you. That's
right.
The both of those are good for me. Probably the former is only good for you. But
I could be a villain. I'm cool with that.
But those are the things that really, create the stickiness. And so, do we have a better shot at doing that with and keeping, the top British talent in the marketplace? Absolutely, for sure. But are we going to do it with international players too? 100%.
Honestly, you say it's only the former is better for me, and Goods can chime in on this too. But I think even being the villain, I'm joking around, but even being the villain as an American basketball player playing in Europe, I think that's one of the things that kind of gets you going. So to your point, to be able to tell those stories, and just if I can go to a gym and people are showing up to boo me or yell at me, like that's part of the fun as a player too. I think guys really relish in that. I don't know if Goods agrees. You get some of that in places like Israel and the Balkans and stuff like that. But I think that's something that would honestly attract some of the best players, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm gonna say this though. I think especially like the BBL has been like one of the leagues, and I said this probably like 5 years ago. I was like, the moment they get like some money and like especially like whether it be like the football teams or whatever start, or just even outside investors start investing the money in the right places, I think the BBL is going to blow up and turn into a league that Americans want to play in, because obviously the language barrier, but I think it's but I think one of the things that creates, kind of going along with what you were saying, Aaron, in regards to getting people to take interest in the players, I think is also the inclusion of culture. And I think that the NBA started to learn about that and do that in regards to the hip hop
Yep.
culture, getting embedded into things, especially, there was a whole fight with the whole dress code thing. And, obviously Allen Iverson, everybody wanted to be a rapper. And, there was this storm, but like once it calmed down, it really turned into something beautiful. And I think that aided in the growth. And I see it in certain places in Europe, like Paris basketball. They're starting to, it's an entertaining environment. And then you go down the street to Nanterre and you're bored again. You know what I'm saying? So I think, being tapped in with the culture and being inclusive of the culture also helps fans draw parallels to a player, like, oh, he's dancing to that song, I like that song too. And now you have another way to level with the player.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and it's actually one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have in British Basketball League, because basketball is such a popular sport in the UK, and let's say that there's still a lot of connectivity that can be made with sort of the grassroots community that plays the sport, and pulling that thread across from like people who are playing the playground, people that are like really into UK hip hop, people that are really into sort of like UK fashion designers, and how does that thread into the league? Like, we're just at the precipice of starting to do that. George's probably seen a little bit of evidence of it, and some of the people that have come out to the game so far, and like we had some different drill rappers perform from the UK, like at some of the games. But you're absolutely right that like, if you wind this all back, like ultimately, like the brands that is, and part of it is, you were sort of talking about being a hero or a villain. The reason why you want to be a hero is because that creates bigger brand opportunities for you as players, right? Like, because ultimately the brands that are associated with the economy of basketball want to sell stuff, and they're looking for people who are going to, generate good vibes and that emotive connection that I talked about before. And one of the things that you're pointing out, Anthony, is that trends come out of youth culture, and most generally inner city youth culture is where those things come from. And so if you're able to connect to that, then you're able to connect with the things that are trending in a particular marketplace, whether that's music, fashion, art, what have you. And the more that you can connect the culture of the game to those things, the more that you have the chance to be on the edge of all of those trend movements and how brands are capitalizing on them, because the brands are going to be spending money to support how they connect with them as well. And if you're looked at as an ambassador, either as like from a league perspective or at a player level, because you are connecting with them, you're in the catbird seat. If you sort of look at all the things that LeBron has done brilliantly throughout his career, his ability to align with all of those cultural elements, to set up his production company with Maverick Carter, and like, all of those things to make sure that they're always right at the center of all of those cultural developments because of all of the benefits that can be reaped on the other side of it.
100%. And I guess I only said villain because guys overseas, guys overseas have never even had the opportunity to. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ant, but a lot of these contracts that guys overseas sign kind of take away the NIL power from the players immediately, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah. They strip
no money.
Yeah, it's almost like a college deal in a sense where that's stripped immediately. So being a villain or a hero, it's really just the best you can get is the energy of the crowd or the energy of a game. Which I got to shout out my team, London Lions, for that Paris game. Honestly, was one of the best atmospheres. As far there's obviously been bigger crowds as far as like Greece and Maccabi and stuff like that. But as far as just the entertainment, the excitement and the hoopla of a basketball game in Europe, I think that was the best environment I've gotten a chance to be a part of. But like I said, the NIL is stripped immediately. So I don't know.
Well, I'm actually curious to hear from you guys. Like,
yeah.
Having played as long as you did in many different countries, like at the beginning of your, what are the things that drove you? And let me back up a second. When I started thinking about going into this role and learning about the British Basketball League and spoke to a bunch of, my players that have played for me, that have played, all over the world, and asked them like what went into their decisions to play in different places and what would have and what would attract them to playing in the UK in the British Basketball League. Like what are the things that would be attractive to them? And I'm sort of curious from your guys' viewpoint, like what are the things that have driven your decisions or decisions of friends, colleagues, teammates that you guys have had to play? You guys have played in all sorts of different places. I got to imagine there's a set of criteria: money, culture, fans, coaching, competition level. Where did you start, and did those things change over time? And like, as you sort of think, if you were in my seat, for example, and thinking about how do I set an attractive environment to attract the top players to play in this league, how would you think about it?
Good, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think obviously competition level and money is usually at the forefront. Aside from that, I would say that's probably like tier one, and then tier two, you start thinking about culture. Do you like the food? Are you going to have trouble speaking English? Are there going to be things to do in your free time? Because realistically, I mean, you're in practice. You practice twice a day. You're in the gym. 4, maybe 6 hours tops. And then and if you practice once a day, then you just got all day and you're just sitting at the house. So that's where like the environment, like what do my apartments look like? Do I have a car and things like that? I remember when I was younger, I seen one of my friends was playing in Spain and they gave him a house. And I'm like, man, he's in a house. And I just had a 3-bedroom apartment. So you know what I'm saying? It was like that was like the goal. And it was like, and that was just from me seeing it on social media. So I think that honestly, and even on Swish Cultures, man, I remember when we posted Shane Larkin's crib, and he's got a sauna in his crib and he got a movie theater. Obviously that's like the elite of the elite, but people never really see these things. And so it's like you kind of get attracted to obviously what you see, and then obviously if that's kind of like important to you, in regards to where you live. But I think that the BBL's benefit, especially to foreigners, is that there's no language barrier, and the outside stuff is cool. But again, I don't know how they're living. You know what I'm saying? Car situation. Some guys always want a car, and then obviously money and competition is going to come into play. But I think those are usually the boxes that I check. But if I was in your seat, my thing would be more so to show how some of the players are living, like off the court. but like the ones that are living well, like the Jordan Taylors that, you know what I mean, that are walking around with the, with the chains out on podcasts and stuff.
Level.
You know what I mean? All I see is lights. All I see is city lights behind them. You know what I mean?
You see my lights. You gotta go check out Aaron's view over there, man. You gotta go check out. Don't let him fool you.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that just showing the entire experience. I remember I went to a London Lions game like I don't know, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago to go see my friend play, and I was like, man, this is a nice arena. You know what I mean? And like it was just something like that. I was like, oh, okay, I could play here. Like this is cool. Like I already like the city. Everybody speaks English. They got a nice arena. So then I think the other part is just showing the living arrangements, and then now you have players a little more interested. And and then they'll take a pay cut to play there.
And has that changed? Do you think that changed for you from like the time that you first started playing until 3 years in, 5 years in, 8 years in? Like, did your priorities change?
Yeah, I mean, when you first starting out, you just trying to make as much money as possible, and get on the best team that you can get to. Yeah. As you get older and you start like seeing the lay of the land, how things are working, then your priorities change a little bit, especially on the second half of your career. Yeah. I just want to be comfortable. I'm not trying to deal with BS, crazy coaches, late payments. Like, I just want to have a more enjoyable season so I can just focus on basketball.
There are some things that there's some things that should just be universal that you kind of expect. I mean, obviously, if the money's somewhat, everybody wants to make as much money. And be on a good team. I think when I first got overseas, I was thinking like there's a supreme level of ignorance about European basketball and a lack of education. I ended up signing to Italy because I could go to Rome or I could go to Podgorica, Montenegro. So for me, I was like, I don't know what the hell that is. I'm going to Rome. So I took less money regardless of the living situation or whatever. The apartment in Podgorica ended up being nicer. I saw it, but I think that one thing that the advantage of BBL has is, to your point, would be the storytelling. Because I think as I've gotten older, being a part or being connected to home in a way, I think has become super important, especially to this younger generation of hoopers. And being on Swish cultures or, being on social media with the EuroLeague or the Euro Cup and having your family see it and being able to kind of feel like your game is important is a big thing to hoopers now. And I think there's such a baseline as far as the car goes and the living accommodations. Like nobody has really set themselves apart, and I don't think anybody ever will from that standpoint. Where if like I said, if you're on TV, if one of the biggest things coming from Romania to London is my family now, like, oh, we can catch your games on YouTube. The London Lions social media team is great. They're posting stuff. I can retweet it. I can interact with them, and that's something that honestly for me, I realized when I went to France and played EuroLeague, it made me enjoy the game that much more because you get to share, you kind of get to share your talents and your accomplishments and what you have going on from thousands of miles away with the people that you care about most. Which
you shine a light on what you're doing.
You shine a light on what you're doing, which I think, to me, honestly,
otherwise you're in the dark.
You're in the dark, and I think. And that's, nobody likes to be in the darkness, right? Most people don't like to be a villain. I can do it, but most people don't like to be in the darkness or be a villain. So I think, and honestly, I don't even think that that's something a lot of guys realize. But with social media and the world shrinking so much now, I think it immediately raises the joy of players when they can, again, share their light with the people back home.
That's really interesting. That's a good one. I hadn't really thought about that as much, but I can appreciate why that would be important to have your family and friends at home to be able to see you play.
100.
And I give you, I think when I was in Poland or somewhere, I think they had it was $10 subscription, to watch all the games, for people back home and stuff like that. So you can get off of YouTube, $10 subscription. The players usually would pay it and just kind of treat it like Netflix. They would just share it with their family and stuff like that. Yeah. But, just creating some way, I think, as Jordan said, creating some way that your family and everybody back home can watch is huge. I think that also it plays a minor role in decision making as well.
And with all that being said and being seen, how important do you think, Aaron, is it for London, Leicester, Surrey, however many teams you can have from the BBL to participate in European competition, whether it be Champions League, Euro League, or what have you, for the success of the BBL?
Well, I mean, you guys actually answered the question for me before, which is like you want to be able to have the opportunity at least to play against, with the best competition. Mm-hmm. So, I don't think the players in this league are any different. No league in the world is sending every single team for the league, to play in these European competitions. You got to qualify. Mm-hmm. I think that, we've already seen it this year with you guys playing in Euro Cup, that really sort of the first time in an awful long time that a team from the BBL has competed, and you guys are making a good show of it so far. And, I think that you have expectations to perform even better than you have already. Mm-hmm. And that just, I think demonstrates sort of both the level of play and also, be able to measure yourself up against those other players from all over the world. I think part of the challenge is, for me in the position is trying to figure out, from a business model standpoint, how does that work, right? Mm-hmm. Because I'm really focused on building a domestic league, having all of the teams be competitive, figuring out all the revenue sources that are related. And, my revenue sources are not going to be substantively different than what I described for the NBA, albeit, minus a 0 or 2. But like, I'm looking at, how do we drive broadcast rights? How do we get on air and get exposure, on a national level for the teams? How do we create a licensing business so that like it is cool for people to go around wearing a London Lions or a Leicester Riders jersey? How do we build a content business big enough that we're generating more eyeballs, more awareness, all the things that you guys are talking about? The economics of Euro Cup is a little bit different. It probably requires sort of a little bit of a different conversation, because of how you can generate revenues from. Yes, obviously you get a gate because it's another home day. There are a number of other home dates that you get to sell tickets, and like how do you drive broadcast revenues, because it's almost like a separate deal that you have to make, and like. EuroLeague controls the rights in Euro Cup, and FIBA would control the rights for the FIBA competitions. It's just a different economic model, and it's a little bit more challenging, and one that I'm frankly figuring it out, because we absolutely want to have our teams compete, and we absolutely want to make it economically beneficial for not only the teams, the league, and the players to do so. And you guys hit on one thing on the NIL, which, I sort of want to drill into a little bit more. And I, was kind of like skirting around this a little bit, but like your marketability, like for me, and in particular in social media, if you look at like the league's footprint in terms of eyeballs that I can generate, whether it's, watching the telecast, whether it's YouTube, whether it's social media following, the players have big social media followings. Mm-hmm. And so, if I'm, and I actually don't think you were there, Jordan, but I've spoken to some of the teams about this, and speak to every player in the league. When I look at like how are we going to generate revenues, one of the biggest things that we can do, and sort of goes to my point about building economy, is to develop like branded content where we're doing storytelling that's related to players, whether it's related to the league, and we want to integrate brands into that branded content. And so where this becomes valuable is I want to reach as many eyeballs, relevant eyeballs, as I can with that content. And the players can actually play a huge role in helping to support that, mm-hmm. right? If you've got a couple 100,000 followers, we've got Obi Soko on London Lions has 1 million+ followers because he's on Love Island, like, that's a big audience that we can help to get distribution for these campaigns. And, for me, I would like to think that that's creating revenue opportunities for the league and for the players if they're helping to support the distribution of these types of content initiatives. And so, one of the things that going way, way back when social media first started and I was still coaching, it's like, you're telling kids, don't be stupid about what you're putting on social media because it'll be there forever. Mm-hmm. And some future employer will see it. And, it can easily disqualify you as quickly as it qualifies you.
Yep.
And so, you want to have, let's call it, relatively clean, wholesome feeds, because brands, if we are going to try and build on these types of opportunities that I'm describing, the brands are going to want to be associated with accounts that they feel comfortable with from a content association standpoint. And so, any player, when I was as a coach or even now as a league executive, I would tell any player who's managing their social media, like, you're managing yourself as your own brand. You're selling yourself every single day in some sort of way. You're selling yourself for your next job. You're selling yourself for association. You're selling yourself in terms of your friends. And so you want to be very judicious in terms of how you manage that. And, for those who are really good at it and are able to cultivate an audience while doing that, there are all sorts of benefits that can be reaped because you have that type of reach.
See, and that is honestly, when I first signed in London, I was thinking, like, the goal is just to get the team to EuroLeague. And one of the cool surprises about being here has been meeting you, Aaron, and kind of hearing the vision for the BBL, because there's not leagues in Europe, individual, I don't even think EuroLeague and Euro Cup with a vision like that. And again, just to reiterate the same point, that it continues to shine a light on what you're doing overseas and gives you opportunities outside of basketball, which I think, to bring it all the way full circle, I guess, is what the NBA has kind of turned basketball into with LeBron and the more than an athlete movement and stuff like that. So that alone, for players to be able to see those type of initiatives and those type of and the vision behind the BBL, I think is arguably the biggest selling point for me, for top level talent to come to the BBL. It's like, again, a contract in EuroLeague, if you're making $300,000 playing for Asvel or whoever it is, or you can go to Plymouth or Surrey and you can make, I don't know, 200 at some point, but you can get all those opportunities and create relations off the court. I think that becomes an easier decision, and one that guys would be willing to make and forego EuroLeague if that's not in the cards.
But it's about exposure, though. You gotta like if you don't know it, then you not like think about it. If there was no Instagram, we wouldn't have known nothing. Like, you know what I'm saying? You don't know how you living in anywhere, and that's where, like, when we did the thing with Shane Larkin, we showed his house. I was doing something with EuroLeague, and then it ended up being a one-off. It was supposed to be a series, but I don't know, the sponsor fell out or whatever. But I mean, the idea is just it's perfect. You got these guys, that people are interested in, and obviously they're living good, and you kind of just you get to show a different lifestyle that people don't really know about, especially stateside. And then I think also, I don't think enough leagues take advantage of showing or creating a fun environment in the arena. I think they do the bare minimum sometimes, and at least the leagues that I've played in, and I think that's a big difference.
But you guys are hitting on 3 points that I want to talk about, but go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, real quick, and Goods, we've talked about this plenty of times. I think the consensus around Europe right now is that the EuroLeague wants London and Paris in the EuroLeague, right? And I don't think it's really known that the BBL, what Aaron is trying to do with the BBL. So to your point, it takes exposure. But when you start telling those stories and all that, and I think people understand what's going on with the BBL, I don't want to say the EuroLeague thing is going to become an afterthought, but I think, I think it's really going to, like I said before, it's really just going to open guys' eyes to what's going on in the UK. And I don't know about you, but I've had several people hit me up talking about what's the other teams like, what's London like, just in my DMs, guys. You know how it is, guys who I'm cool with, but now all of a sudden they're, we having full-blown conversations, and I haven't spoken to you in 2 years just from that interest alone. So for me, it's just an exciting thing. It's exciting for me to be a part of as well. So
that's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate the the nice words. Flattery will get you everywhere. But like, you sort of hit on a couple things, and you almost made the point better than I did, which is you need a really strong domestic base, and you treat sort of European competition as its own sort of discrete business enterprise. Like from a competition standpoint, it's, I get it. Like you guys want to play against the best players, and it has to make business sense. And the stronger the domestic league is, the more sense that the European business will make, because you've built up enough audience that are going to show up for midweek games, for example. You've built up enough audience that broadcasters are going to be like, okay, this is really strong. I want to put on these European games in the UK market, and you're able to generate revenue in that way, for example. And then, as you're pointing out, like, one of the things that was interesting about meeting you, Jordan, is like, you have interest in sort of cultivating a career in media following your playing days. And like, I would, I'm not suggesting that I have a fully articulated pathway for guys to get involved, but I'm certainly open for, like, let's figure it out for ways that you can actually cultivate that interest, get reps doing it, 100%. And try and bring you positive experiences that you can leverage as you move into the next phase of your career.
100%. And before we move on to culture, to our culture segment, and Goods chime in on this one too, but I want to touch on the competition part of it. You guys want the best competition, but the Europe's not like the NBA, where you have LeBron James and Kevin Durant, Kyrie, where it's just like, oh yeah, those dudes are like that. I mean, you do have Mike James, you have Shane Larkin, who has separated themselves from the field, Vezenkov, Dwayne Bacon, et cetera, et cetera. You have a few guys, but how many times have you heard guys go to Israel or France and play against guys who are just on the regular French team? You have Tremaine Waters in Levallois, and you're like, oh, those guys are just as talented. I mean, maybe they didn't catch the right break or whatever, but those guys can play too. So I don't think going to necessarily playing in EuroLeague means it makes guys feel like they're playing. It's more of a prestige more than actually playing against the best talent, I guess.
And I think too, it's also another important thing is, like, because let's just say the BBL is not well known in regards to the other domestic leagues in Europe. It's also like, for some guys, it's like, okay, if I do go play here for a season, will I be able to go somewhere else? Is that league respected enough? So telling that story too, telling that story that, okay, so-and-so went here from Spain and then he went right back to Spain, or he went to France, or he went to Italy. So then it's just like, okay, well, I could go over here for a year. If I like it, I'll stay. And if not, I could still continue my career at a similar level. Like, I think that's also a concern for some players going to leagues that are up and coming.
It's definitely a focus for us. Like, we want, if people want to move on, we want this to be a very marketable opportunity for them. I think one of the things that's curious to me, and I have, frankly haven't figured it out yet, is the level of bouncing around that the players do. And I get, some of it is a function of the way the teams and the leagues and the businesses are structured. Some of it, I suppose, is a function of, guys looking for, like, what's the next, where's the grass greener on the next move? But I wonder if I suspect that it is prospectively better for everyone to have more levels of stability, where you're staying in a place for 1, 2, 3 years.
100%. 100%.
And so, that's something that I'm definitely interested in exploring further and figuring out whether, if we can reinforce that in our league.
I think stability is, whether you know it or not. I think maybe young age, but you want to move around and see different things or whatever. But I think stability from a living standpoint, but more so just from a performance standpoint. If you look at the best teams in Europe, those guys have been together for, like, the domestic players for sure have been together for years. And then, you add in a couple, American, a Serbian, whatever it is, to the squad. But yeah, stability is a huge thing that I think is appreciated in Europe once you get older, for sure. But I also think, Goods, there's the synergy for what you're talking about. Like, I think guys that would come over to the BBL, if you can pay them enough, it's the guys that are kind of somewhat established, and they're like, all right, let me go try it out. And those guys won't have a problem kind of going back to where they were. And I mean, myself as an example, I went to Japan for 2 years following EuroLeague, and then came right back to Euro Cup. So I don't think that's too big of an issue these days.
Yeah, and I also think if you have high turnover, like let's say a player comes and then he leaves, I feel like it's a good thing because now other players see it's safe.
Yeah.
So now more guys already want to come there just because of the whole English language barrier, and UK is a lot more fun than a lot of these cities in other countries. So
Anthony, you're hired for the marketing team.
Right. Easy.
You're head of external relations.
He's got. I told you he's got his production qualities too, but we'll save that for another time. But let's move on to our culture. I guess it's somewhat of redundant a little bit, but how do you think that Europe as a whole, is it possible because it's several economies? How do you think Europe as a whole can do a better job of relating to its existing and potential fans?
Look, I mean, it's challenging for me because I can only sort of speak about what we're doing in the BBL now, and of course my own experience in the NBA. I think that and this is one of the things that's challenging about EuroLeague, Euro Cup, the FIBA competitions, is the advantage the United States has is it's one market. You can do one TV deal, you cover the whole market. You do one deal with State Farm, and I've got the insurance provider for the official insurance partner of the NBA. When you're in 10, 15, 20 different markets, you may not have the same insurance company. In fact, you're highly likely not to. You have 10, 15, 20 different broadcast deals you have to do. So, that just challenges your ability to be able to tell, to have uniform storytelling. And of course, then you get into language barriers and all of that across all of those pieces where you can engage at mass level with fans. And it's done, I don't want to say it's micro, but it's, small segment targeting. And so, I think that being said, one of the things that's been striking to me, early on in my tenure here in the British Basketball League is like the amount of young families that are coming to games with really young kids. Like even more like the NBA to some degree has gotten out of the price range of being able to attract those types of people. Whereas, I think certainly in the UK, and I would imagine in Europe as well, this is more like you're competing for an entertainment night out. And you're competing against like, am I going to go to a restaurant? Am I going to go to like an amusement park? Am I going to go to the movies, or am I going to go to a game? Whereas, the NBA is much more driven by season ticket holders, corporate. You're getting a much older fan group. And one of the things that I've appreciated is the way that the players are engaging with those kids before and after the game. And like, even just the other night where we had actually your game, Jordan, and there was a visiting team and there were a bunch of visiting fans that came, and they were so excited and thrilled to meet the players from the London team. They already had relationships actually with the Plymouth. All the Plymouth players knew them and, were dapping them up before and after the game. But, to have the chance to have the players come around after the game, which, I know you guys do after every single one of your games, walk around, talk to the kids, like you really don't see that level of approachability in the NBA anymore. I don't know that you really ever saw it at that type of level. So you have a chance to form more community. It almost goes to what I was saying before about the stability. Is I think those are things that even resonate for the players as well, as like feeling more a part of the community. When I talk to like a lot of my former players about their experiences playing overseas, I won't name him, but there's a kid who played at Villanova. He's one of their top recruits. Went to play professionally, and he was telling me about his time in playing in Greece. And he was like, I go to practice for 2-3 hours a day, and then I'm basically in the apartment the rest of the time. Like I'm not out and about in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, it's both boring and like I'm not like, I don't feel like I have a connection. And, you know, part of it is language. Part of it is like, how do you engage those players into the community? It's actually one of the things that I've been thinking about a little bit more. I don't know that I've like fully fleshed out my thinking about it, but like, you know, where you have X number of hours that you're practicing a day. Are there other things that you can do that are either A, sort of helping you advance in what you want to do in your career in the market, B, engaging in the community in some particular way, or C, accomplishing both, right? So like you're able to gain some material experience that's going to support you in the next step in your career, and you're having that community engagement that's really starting, you know, where the fans feel like they're invested in you as a player, but also in the team. I think to some degree that's futures, but I've been thinking about it a lot in terms of, you know, looking at the team's practicing schedules, like what are the players doing, like what are different ways that you can get involved.
Yep, 100%. There's I mean that again, that's one of those things that just kind of makes your experience that much more enjoyable. Running low, so real quick, 5-word answer. What do y'all foresee as 5-word answer? What do y'all foresee as the next market or the next wave of branding in the NBA? Aaron, you can go ahead. If it's just a particular place or whatever.
12 months ago, it would have been metaverse.
Yep.
It's a really good question, you know, in terms of the next level. I think we actually hit on it before, accidentally. And what that is that, and sorry for it's more than 4 or 5 words, but I'll say it in one word. Individuals as media entities.
I was about to say that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I think you know, players. I think we saw it in the bubble. You know, when guys started vlogging and things of that nature, and now we're seeing it with the whole podcast wave. And but I think, you know, and I felt like about 3 summers ago, everybody had a docuseries. You know, over the summer, Isaiah Thomas and KD and everybody. But I think that is definitely, like, I think we're gonna start seeing players probably with their own channels and streaming services or something like that. I think it's gonna move into that type of direction where they're gonna have subscribers and whatnot.
That's gonna be interesting to see how that affects the rest of media. But I was just gonna keep it simple, stupid, and say Africa. But we'll move on from that. And good, you got the last one for us.
Last segment of the day is paycheck, rain check. Somebody's paycheck is taking a rain check, and you know, we're gonna cross over on this one, man. It's interesting. The head coach from Panathinaikos, Dejan Radin, had a 3-hour. They said allegedly a 3-hour conversation with the owner of Panathinaikos. I don't want to mess up his name, but Demetrius sat down with him, and usually you get that 3-hour conversation. They're giving you the walking papers at the end. But instead, supposedly Dejan came out of that meeting with an unlimited budget to sign and or cut players. And this is probably the first time that I've heard this being publicly announced by any team. But what do y'all think about this move? If that is indeed true, he has an unlimited budget now to sign and cut players for Panathinaikos, who's obviously they're kind of struggling right now in EuroLeague.
Aaron, you to guess. You go first.
Is KD on his way over?
Oh, shoot. I'm gonna say the dudes there better be careful because the unlimited budget might just mean that they not getting paid. So I don't know if that really is true in that way. But if they got an unlimited budget, man, I just don't. In Europe, how much does that matter? Because again, to Aaron's point, if you don't get a KD, who on the market? Who's available? Who on the market is so good that, like, if you give them whatever, let's say you give them $5 million, that they're going to make that big of a difference? All those guys are already playing in the NBA, in my opinion.
Yeah, but It's a timely. I feel like it's a timely announcement in the sense that obviously agents are reading this, but I think NBA contracts are guaranteed, around January 20th or something like that. Again, 2 ways as well. So a couple guys like Tyler Dorsey just got waived and whatnot. A couple guys may become available, pretty soon. So I think it was a timely announcement, whether they knew that or not, but. We'll see how it plays out. I thought it was interesting.
That sounds like kind of a dumb announcement on the team's behalf, right? Because you're kind of giving up a little
I
bit
think
of
the
leverage.
the timing is interesting, right? Like you'd probably be more likely to do that at the end of the season, going into the following season, right? Because
right.
if you're targeting success this year, you could sign all sorts of great players, maybe, as you guys suggested. But then they all got to fit together. You got to coach them up. Like, how's it going to work? We're already nearly halfway through the year.
Shoot, maybe they got Dwight Howard on the hook. Maybe he's leaving Taiwan. Who knows?
Hey, I wouldn't be surprised.
Who knows, man? But listen, that's great, man. That is the Role Player Podcast. Again, check us out on the YouTube page for Swish Cultures at the Role Player Pod on IG and the _RoleP. I am Jordan Taylor for Anthony Goods and Aaron Radin. We appreciate you joining us. We had a great time. We're looking forward to hopefully having you back again and also seeing where the BBL, the British Basketball League, goes in the future. And we're excited to follow it.
It's a lot of fun, guys. I appreciate the time. Thanks for having me. Really fun.